Let's embark on a journey to the 3rd century BCE, a time when two vast empires were taking shape at the far edges of the Eurasian continent, Rome and China. These empires, over time, would stretch across vast territories, encompass diverse populations, develop sophisticated methods of governance, and shape enduring ideas about governance. Empires weren't a novelty. The Egyptians along the Nile, for instance, had been living within empires since the 3rd millennium BCE. Empires had risen and fallen in places like Mesopotamia, India, Africa, and Asia for centuries. As Romans were organizing their small city into a republican structure, and warring states were battling for dominance in China, Alexander the Great was on a conquest spree, extending his rule from the eastern Mediterranean to Central Asia and the Indies. However, Alexander's empire was largely dependent on his military presence and crumbled with his death after just 12 years. In contrast, Rome and China established enduring and influential empires. What set them apart and allowed them to shape the course of world politics for centuries? Some answers lie in their ability to govern and exploit diverse populations. While some strategies were similar, Rome and China also developed distinctive methods of rule. They dealt with unique economic possibilities and challenges, had different political foundations, and transformed their acquired territories in distinct ways. This narrative will focus on their administrative structures, legitimization tactics, and interactions with outsiders. In Roman times, historians were intrigued by what made their empire so powerful and successful. For instance, Polybius, a Greek scholar living in Rome, pondered why the whole world seemed to fall under Rome's power in less than 53 years. They acknowledged Rome's favorable Mediterranean location, which offered proximity to the sea, good communication links with Greece and North Africa, a temperate climate, and agricultural potential. But other people also aspired to make this land their own. What made Rome, in particular, the city-state that united the lands surrounding the Mediterranean? The journey began with conquest, a common starting point for empires. However, Rome's real strength lay in its ability to continually link human and economic resources to central power. Innovative political organization allowed Rome to sustain a massive, far-reaching army, create incentives for cooperation with the central authority, and propagate a compelling culture centered on military strength, rule-based order, divine authority, and the virtues of civic life. Roman innovations, including citizenship, law, republicanism, at least for a time, and the memory of the Republic, drew both old and new elites into the government and military. They absorbed the cultural achievements of previous empires, accommodated local religions and laws while expanding the influence of Roman gods, and offered a captivating Roman way of life, complete with Roman roads, architecture, writing, and festivals. The Romans created an imperial lexicon, institutions, and practices that would influence empire builders, critics, and defenders for 2 millennia. Let's begin our exploration with a look at Rome's journey to empire, starting with the role of war and the political innovations that set it on the path to becoming a dominant empire. Like many empires, Rome's journey began with conquest. It's important to note that while Rome became an empire, it was primarily a republic, at least for a significant part of its expansion. Around 500 BCE, Rome transitioned from a monarchy to a republic, a transformation of immense consequence. Most of the territory we recognize as the Roman Empire today was acquired from the 2nd century BCE to the 1st century CE, and throughout most of this period, Rome was governed by elected representatives. This fact challenges the idea that empires can't coexist with republican forms of government. During times of crisis, the Roman Republic could be led by dictators. It wasn't until 27 BCE, when Augustus took the title of emperor, that elected leadership gave way to a single ruler's lifetime rule. Rome's path to empire wasn't about replacing earlier empires, as Alexander had done when defeating the Persians. Instead, Romans created their imperial space by conquering and integrating tribes, cities, and kingdoms, first in Italy and later beyond its borders. This era of conquest included near defeats, inspired loyalty, and deeply embedded military values in the empire's institutions and spirit. Rome's first conquests were in Italy, which offered a landscape of potential wealth, including mountains, fertile plains, and strategic port cities. The peninsula was inhabited by various groups, including Gauls, Etruscans, Latins, and colonies of Greeks and Carthaginians. This diverse mix presented both opportunities and challenges to Roman expansion. In the 4th century BCE, the Romans fought against the Etruscans and Gauls, with the latter group raiding their city. After defeating the Etruscans, the Romans contemplated relocating their city. However, the burning of Rome by the Gauls in 387 BCE led to a rallying cry by Camillus, a military leader who implored the Romans to stay and not let their barbarian enemies see them retreat. This moment turned a crisis into an opportunity for homeland loyalty and resilience. So, Rome's path to empire was paved with conquest, but it was their innovative governance and political structures that set the stage for the emergence of a dominant and enduring empire. As the Romans expanded their rule to encompass more lands and diverse peoples, they had to adapt their institutions to effectively govern not only their imperial capital but also the distant regions under their dominion. Initially, the Roman king, who served both as a political and military leader, couldn't be in two places at once. To solve this problem, the Romans introduced a system of 2 consuls, often referred to as chief magistrates. These consuls were elected annually by Rome's citizen soldiers. This was a revolutionary shift, as it transferred the source of authority from royal or celestial figures to the Roman citizens themselves. By creating a body of citizens whose decisions became the foundation of law, the Romans decentralized sovereignty and vested it in the people. This transition from a monarchy to a republic was accompanied by measures designed to prevent a return to one-man rule. In the Republic, personal authority was curtailed through term limits on magistracies, the power of the people's assemblies, and the authority of the Senate, which was composed of serving or former magistrates and other prominent individuals. These institutions operated under a commitment to legal procedures for creating, enforcing, and altering rules. Roman historian Livy described Rome as a free nation, governed by annually elected officers of state and subject not to the caprice of individual men but to the overriding authority of the law. This law, the cornerstone of Roman governance, emanated from the Roman people. While magistrates, including consuls, had the power to issue binding orders and make judicial decisions, the approval of citizen assemblies was essential to turn a magistrate's proposal into law. The assemblies also conducted criminal trials. Yet, it's important to note that Roman commitment to legal authority and procedures did not equate to egalitarianism. Slaves and women were not citizens and had no say in Roman sovereignty. Voting rights were restricted to specific categories of people, and not all citizens could become magistrates or consuls. The Roman Republic preserved the dominance of the wealthiest families but channeled and harnessed their competition through institutionalized procedures. Magistrates were elected by assemblies based on units of the army, and wealthier taxpayers held more electoral influence. The Roman Republic struck a balance between hierarchy, recognition of talent, and the principle of popular sovereignty. It accommodated ambitious newcomers, often military heroes, as well as individuals from established, wealthy, or influential backgrounds, allowing them to shape policies in their interests. The overarching principle that the people and their elected representatives made the law proved both inspirational and adaptable, ensuring its endurance. The term imperial has an intricate history. In Rome, imperium originally referred to the king's authority to impose punishment, conscript citizens into armies, and lead campaigns. This power was transferred to the consuls during the Republic, underscoring the connection between military and civil matters in Roman governance. Imperium conveyed the power to sentence people to death or compel them to fight. However, in the Roman Republic, which was fervently committed to constraining individual powers, imperium wasn't absolute. Consuls' rights as commanders-in-chief existed only outside Rome itself. Over time, Roman citizens or specific categories of them acquired the right not to be subjected to corporal punishment or death. This, too, was a product of Roman introspection and reflection on the concept of imperial power, the analysis of its underlying principles, and the justification and adaptation of its use. The Roman quest for empire had consequences. In 241 BCE, when Roman consuls were leading armies against neighboring regions, the office of praetor was created to extend military and judicial control to new areas and handle legal matters between Romans and the conquered peoples. As Romans expanded their control far beyond Italy, praetors, often accompanied by troops, were dispatched to take charge of unruly regions. In the early Republic, citizens voted in assemblies organized by military units, or centuries, and in assemblies based on their membership in Roman tribes. As the empire expanded, the assembly of tribes, comitia tributa, grew more influential. It elected officials known as tribunes, conducted trials, and could intervene with magistrates in cases involving commoners. These gradual shifts in institutions of popular sovereignty enabled both old, patrician, and new families that profited from Rome's economic expansion to participate in politics and merge into a class of good men or nobilitas. The assembly of tribes also provided Rome with a mechanism to incorporate outsiders who hadn't been part of the Republic. Roman innovations in governance have left an indelible mark on our political vocabulary. Concepts like patrician, plebeian, and noble continue to influence our thinking about status, while terms like senate and committees remain integral to our political systems. In many countries, magistrates fulfill legal functions, and courts are often referred to as tribunals. Diplomatic relations are still carried out by consuls. While Rome's institutions weren't established for all times and places, they've provided templates and ideas that have been emulated, transformed, and reinterpreted in various contexts. To govern the extensive territories beyond their capital, Romans developed strategies that would later be adopted by other empire builders. One of these strategies was the expansion of Roman rights to incorporate a larger population. The nearest towns in Italy were simply annexed, and free males were made Roman citizens, allowing elites to become Roman nobles. The extension of citizenship beyond Rome was a pivotal innovation, although even within the Latin core area, different cities and their populations were granted varying rights. In certain cases, the population was required to serve as soldiers without political representation. As Rome expanded its control into more distant, non-Latin regions of Italy, they negotiated treaties with the leaders of conquered cities, granting them a degree of internal autonomy while they remained subordinate to Rome in fiscal and military matters. Another Roman strategy involved the founding of colonies, and this practice became a hallmark of their imperial expansion. Unlike other powers, such as Rome's adversary Carthage, that settled people in distant regions, the Romans established colonies with their own citizenship regimes and military functions. Citizenship became transferable. Settlers dispatched from Rome and other Latin cities renounced their rights in their places of origin to become citizens of these new colonies. Colonies were typically established in areas that required defense. For the soldier agriculturalists and their families assigned to a colony, it was both an opportunity to become a more prominent figure in a much smaller city than Rome and a sacrifice, as they left Rome for a frontier outpost. These settlers brought with them their language, expectations, and experiences of Roman ways. Roman strategies for governance and empire building, characterized by their flexibility and adaptability, have left an indelible imprint on the course of history. As the Romans gradually completed their conquest of Italy, they developed three distinct methods for integrating territories and populations into their growing empire. These strategies laid the groundwork for how future empires would expand and govern. In regions like Latium, the area surrounding Rome, the Romans annexed territories, offered limited citizenship to nearby Latins, and gradually assimilated them into Roman culture and society. For some non-Latin cities and tribes, the Romans allowed a degree of self-government. These areas retained their local institutions, languages, and customs, while recognizing Roman authority. Latins from central regions were relocated to frontier areas as Roman colonies. This approach helped secure border regions and allowed the Romans to exert their influence in distant areas. Crucially, Roman citizenship came to be highly sought after by non-Romans and was seen as more preferable than the limited autonomy granted to allied cities or life in Roman colonies. This desire for Roman citizenship played a pivotal role in the events that unfolded. Between 91 and 88 BCE, Rome's Italian allies rebelled against their second-class status, seeking full Roman citizenship. After significant deliberation, the Roman Senate made a momentous decision to grant citizenship to all Latins. Extending citizenship served as both a reward for service and a method for broadening the scope of loyalty to Rome. In subsequent years, non-Romans serving in the Roman army could earn citizenship after 25 years of service, while victorious generals sometimes awarded citizenship to individuals in distant regions. This push for citizenship among the Latins followed Rome's impressive expansion into new territories. Rome had learned the art of naval warfare to defeat its most formidable rival, Carthage, with its colonies in Sicily and its capital in North Africa. The Romans achieved ultimate victory after a prolonged conflict, capturing Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, and eventually Carthage itself in 202 BCE. From there, Rome's territorial expansion continued, encompassing Macedonia, Greece, Anatolia, Gaul, and parts of England. In 3 centuries, Rome built a sprawling empire that extended across the entire Mediterranean and its European and Near Eastern hinterlands. With their expansion overseas, the Romans developed a new institution, the province, ruled by a military commander with the authority of a magistrate. Praetors were appointed to govern areas like Sardinia, Sicily, Spain, Africa, around Carthage, and Macedonia between 227 and 146 BCE. Roman administration was often characterized as government without bureaucracy. Power was concentrated in the hands of a single authority, such as a praetor or consul, with a small team of assistants, mainly friends, family, or close associates, as well as a few low-ranking officials, including slaves. The main responsibilities of the Roman government were tax collection, in money or produce, military mobilization, and the maintenance of infrastructure like roads and aqueducts, which were essential for holding the empire together. In the provinces, the strong connection between military service and citizenship, which defined Rome, underwent significant changes. Governors in these regions were primarily tasked with collecting taxes to fund the Roman army, rather than recruiting soldier citizens. Local practices were often left intact, and local elites were sometimes granted Roman citizenship. This minimalist approach to administration accentuated the fundamental divide between Romans, who shared common political and cultural practices, and non-Romans, whose institutions and ways of life were diverse and varied. Romans used law to express this distinction. In outlying areas, Romans could have their legal matters adjudicated under Roman law, while non-Romans often consulted their own legal authorities, a practice known today as legal pluralism. However, when a Roman and a non-Roman had a business dispute, Romans developed theories that distinguished between the civil laws of different nations and the law of all nations, which was applied to foreigners in the Roman Empire by the praetor, especially in disputes between Romans and non-Romans. Roman expansion was driven by the lure of rewards for soldiers and commanders, plunder, slaves, glory, and even more plunder. In subjugated regions, governors and their small staffs often relied on local leaders to collect taxes, whether in money, goods, or troops. Collaboration with local elites, in addition to colonization and enslavement, gradually created new networks and cultural spaces for the assimilative activities at which the Romans excelled. As the tasks of imperial governance became increasingly demanding by the 2nd century BCE, the minimalist institutions of the Roman Republic began to strain. Rome's judicial bodies, particularly, were ill-equipped to handle the rampant corruption that accompanied the sprawling empire. As generals were granted more powers, additional resources, and longer terms in command, often to keep them away from the capital, the Republic became vulnerable to conflicts and wars between ambitious leaders. The entrenched link between political and military command made the expanded Republic susceptible to civil wars. Tensions erupted in 133 BCE when the tribune Tiberius Gracchus was assassinated by senators. The political and military command association had made the large republic vulnerable to internal conflicts. Some old senatorial families tried to preserve the republican institutions against the ambitions of individual consuls. Julius Caesar emerged as a victorious leader from imperial conquests and battles with rivals. He was accused of aspiring to be a king, and this fear was fueled by his display of regal symbols, accumulation of multiple offices and powers, dedication of temples to his cult, and the adoption of an heir, Octavian. Senators assassinated Caesar in 44 BCE shortly after he assumed the ominous title of dictator for life. Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, successfully transformed himself into Rome's first emperor, holding supreme, enduring, and legal authority. He adopted the title imperator and added references to his deified father, becoming Imperator Caesar Divi Filius. In 27 BCE, the Senate granted Octavian new powers, and he was given the title Augustus, a term previously associated with gods and the power to augment or improve things. Octavian also became princeps, the first citizen, marking the transition from the Republic to the Principate, a new form of government concentrated in a single leader. Like the Republic, the Principate was a work in progress, evolving over time. Augustus lived for 41 years as emperor, helping to consolidate the Principate. His successor, Tiberius, took over in 14 CE, presiding over a period of relative peace and prosperity. During this era, the institutions of governance, war, finance, and culture adapted to accommodate the emperor's supreme authority and the complexities of ruling a vast empire. The emperor became known for imperium maius, power greater than that of provincial governors, drawing from the ancient notion of the king of kings. Augustus was granted the final say in all public matters, the ability to halt legal actions against any Roman citizen, and the power to introduce laws to a vote by the Roman people. The electoral powers of the popular assemblies were transferred to the Senate, further eroding republican sovereignty. In 14 CE, through legal processes, Romans formally transferred power to an absolute ruler. This transition would have profound and lasting implications, and the concept of a republican empire and emergency powers would echo through history, even into the 20th century. Augustus, the first Roman emperor, amassed a colossal fortune through various means, including plunder, gifts, taxes, and revenues from his vast personal estates and the provinces under imperial control. This immense wealth gave him the ability to financially support the Roman treasury. The vast territories belonging to the emperor were known as his patrimonium, a term connecting the emperor's authority to that of a father, pater. It emphasized that the emperor was both the head of his own household and the figurative father of all Romans, akin to the legendary Aeneas. This concept highlights the intertwined relationship between empire, fatherhood, and the household, which social scientists now refer to as patrimonialism. Importantly, there was no strict division between the emperor's resources and those of the Roman state. During the reign of Augustus and his successors, a specific office, known as the fiscus or money bag, was responsible for managing the emperor's personal lands as well as the provinces under his direct governance. Initially, taxes in these areas were collected by slaves or newly freed individuals. Over time, members of the aristocracy joined the emperor's personal staff, eroding the authority of the magistrates in the Senate and increasing the significance of service in the emperor's court. The military was another crucial source of the emperor's power, although it presented certain challenges. Augustus maintained the connection between citizenship and military service, intending that the standing army primarily consist of citizens. However, he relocated troops, along with their generals, from Italy to the empire's borders. A special elite force, the Praetorian Guard, was established to protect the emperor, and a standing navy was created. To exert greater personal control, Augustus appointed individuals of equestrian rank who hadn't been elected as magistrates to high-ranking positions in the military and the provinces. This move bypassed both the prerogatives of senators and the system of popular voting. These changes had unintended, long-term consequences. The deployment of Roman legions to the borders led to the spread of Roman culture throughout the empire and temporarily reduced violence in the capital. However, the Praetorian Guard would occasionally involve itself in political rivalries for the emperorship. This manipulation of equestrian and other orders maintained the hierarchy of social classes while attracting new individuals into the imperial elites. In theory, the emperor, as the sole, lifelong military commander, controlled the whole system. In practice, this principle was often reversed. By the time of Augustus, it was customary for a son or adopted son of the emperor to succeed him. However, this did not eliminate power struggles, as these heirs sometimes fought amongst themselves. Moreover, military prowess remained a central value in determining the emperor. In theory, the Senate was responsible for appointing emperors, but in practice, senators or the Senate itself assassinated some emperors. The Praetorian Guard also played a role in declaring emperors. In the 3rd century CE, during a period of economic hardships and internal strife, military success became the deciding factor in power struggles for the throne. The incorporation of ambitious individuals from the provinces into the imperial army and into prestigious ranks allowed people from outside Rome, such as Septimius Severus, to become emperors. The openness of the system, its multiple legitimating institutions, and the emphasis on military glory created a recipe for regicide. Between 235 and 285 CE, there were 26 Roman emperors, and only one of them died of natural causes while in office. The frequent, violent, and tumultuous power struggles for the throne make it evident that, unlike the case of Alexander the Great, it was not the individual emperor that held the Roman Empire together or determined its fate. Instead, it was a vast, complex, and productive economy, extensive networks of material and personal connections, and successful ideological outreach that attracted and compelled the loyalty of the subjects. The Roman economy was not a carefully planned system but a collection of practices. Like other sedentary societies prior to the advent of industrial production, the empire's prosperity was based on agriculture, precious metals, natural resources, and the capacity to process, transport, and trade these goods. Both small farms and large estates were operated by men who held authority over land, slaves, free laborers, and families. As new territories were annexed, new resources became available for taxation or distribution. For some conquered peoples, defeat by the Romans resulted in enslavement, while for some victors, more slaves meant greater labor capacity to manage their estates. Allocating lands in distant provinces to senators gave them a stake in maintaining commercial connections. Taxation was a cornerstone of this operation. The Romans taxed land, individuals, inheritances, slave ownership, imports, exports, and more. The famous Roman censuses were conducted with tax collection in mind. Those responsible for tax collection included officials and tax farmers, individuals who contracted to collect taxes in specific regions. The Roman economy required vast logistical operations to sustain the army and the city of Rome. In the 2nd century CE, the number of soldiers reached around 400,000. The soldiers' daily ration, as recorded in one Egyptian source, included approximately 2 pounds of bread, a pound and a half of meat, a quart of wine, and about half a cup of oil. To feed the city of Rome alone, about 200,000 tons of wheat were required annually. In Augustus's time, Rome had a population of approximately 1 million, making it the most populous city on earth, surpassing even Chang'an, the Chinese capital, unknown to the Romans. Roughly a quarter of Rome's inhabitants were citizens, while the rest consisted of dependents, slaves, and foreigners. Effectively, the Roman Empire functioned as an extensive economic system that thrived due to peace, security, and political unity. The interconnectedness of the empire was vital for the well-being of its regions. Different parts of the empire played essential roles. Africa, Sicily, Sardinia, and Egypt provided grain for Rome, while Gaul, the Danube, the Balkans, and Anatolia supplied the army. Italy, Spain, southern Gaul, and Anatolia were commercially active regions that paid taxes in money, which was used to compensate soldiers and officials. The vast and integrated economic system had a profound impact on people's lives. Local elites managed slave plantations that produced a significant portion of the empire's grain, profiting from their connections to the imperial power. Even the daily lives of ordinary people in distant regions improved under Roman rule. Olive oil and wine were transported across the Mediterranean, influencing the development of cuisines in regions that would later become known as Turkish, Greek, Italian, French, and Spanish. In the 3rd century CE, the rapid and violent changes in leadership, along with external threats from various adversaries, such as the Goths and other barbarian tribes, pirates, and the Persian Empire, as well as the strain on soldiers' remuneration due to inflation, undermined Rome's security. The empire's borders receded under pressure from tribes that had adopted Roman ways and were willing to offer their protection to besieged populations. However, it took centuries for the imperial system to fully unravel from the framework established in the late Republic and the first 2 centuries of the Principate. The Roman Empire presented an alluring opportunity for people of various social standings, whether in the heart of the empire or in its far reaches. This was a civilization that celebrated its divine origins, its earthly magnificence, and what it believed was its superior way of life. For centuries, the Roman Empire excelled in absorbing and integrating earlier cultures into a synthetic Roman way of life. While the concept of cities wasn't invented by the Romans, they significantly transformed urban centers and propagated an adaptable model throughout the empire. The rectangular city plan with cross streets and designated spaces for public works was originally a Greek specialty. Romans took inspiration from Greek cities in southern Italy when designing their urban centers, incorporating novel features like the triumphal arch. Roman architecture was marked by the extensive use of marble, allowing for the construction of impressive buildings. The innovative use of concrete enabled the creation of vaults and domes adorned with elaborate decorations. Furthermore, Romans improved infrastructure by introducing water and sewage systems, public baths, sports facilities, and vast amphitheaters for civic events. For example, the city of Pompeii, with its 20,000 inhabitants, boasted 5 large bathing centers before it was buried in ash following the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE. Law was an integral part of Roman civilization. It served as a means of governance and as a pillar of the social order. For most of the empire's history, Roman law wasn't documented in a uniform manner. It wasn't until the 6th century, in the Eastern Roman capital, Constantinople, that Emperor Justinian sponsored the compilation of laws into a single code. What was distinctly Roman about their legal system was the professional interpretation of law. This interpretation was conducted in a polity where the method of creating laws was an ongoing and legitimate political concern. Unlike earlier times when rulers simply issued laws, Roman jurists emerged around the mid-2nd century BCE. These jurists drew up legal documents, advised magistrates, litigants, and judges, and passed down their knowledge to their students. Prominent Romans argued that law was based on reason, and since humans were reasoning creatures, they should participate in and adhere to it. They emphasized that the laws were specific to each state. Roman consuls and emperors, when justifying their wars as responses to aggression or treaty violations, presupposed the existence of rules for interstate conduct. In principle, Roman law had the potential to be universally applicable. Cicero, a renowned Roman orator, stated that an oath made to an enemy nation must be honored, but a promise to a pirate, who was considered a common enemy to all of humanity, could not be upheld since pirates were seen as outside the bounds of law and trust. Learning and art played a substantial role in shaping the public life of the Roman Empire. Emperors endowed Rome with spectacular buildings, while local elites sought to outdo one another with displays of civic art and architecture in imperial cities. Romans' admiration for earlier civilizations allowed them to emulate, incorporate, and build upon the cultural achievements of Greeks, Persians, and Egyptians. The language of learning and creativity during the Roman expansion was initially Greek. Even as Latin transcended its original function of oratory to become a language of poetry, love, and sensuality, the Roman cultural ideal emphasized education in both Greek and Latin. The Greek term paideia encapsulated the right kind of education, one that prepared young people for a life of knowledge, an appreciation of beauty, and the development of social skills that would lead to calm nobility and civic virtue. Athens, with its history and archaic charm, became a cherished symbol of the universal values expressed in the Roman concept of humanitas. This term encompassed both a judgment and a mission, signifying civilized behavior. It was expressed through learning and social interactions, the responsible exercise of power, and the goal of helping even conquered peoples achieve their human potential. Those who failed to exhibit humanitas were labeled as barbarians, uneducated individuals who lived outside of cities, at least not Roman ones, dressed poorly, behaved badly, and couldn't be trusted to understand Roman laws. The concept of humanitas was open-ended. In theory and practice, it allowed barbarians to become Romans if they adhered to Roman rules and embraced Roman ideals of civilization. Humanitas also served to mask the violence of Roman Empire building, such as plunder, enslavement, looting, killing, and destruction. However, it was also characterized by a capacity for self-critique, concerns about degeneration, and an openness to political debate. The inclusion of civilized critics and the exclusion of those who didn't uphold Roman values created a shared elite culture, a world of both real and imagined connections to the empire and its ideals. Initially, both the Romans and their subjects practiced polytheism, which means they believed in multiple gods. This flexibility allowed Romans to incorporate new deities into their pantheon as they encountered different cultures. For example, gods from civilizations like Egypt and Syria were eventually worshipped in Rome under different names. However, some deities caused problems. Bacchus, the god of fertility and wine, led his followers into disruptive behavior. The Romans abolished the cult of Bacchus in 187 BCE due to these disruptions. Monotheism, which means belief in a single god, posed a challenge to Rome's diverse religious landscape. Jews, who believed in one god, came under Roman rule as the empire expanded eastward. They were allowed to practice their religion, but conflicts with Roman authorities eventually led to a Jewish revolt in Palestine. The Romans destroyed the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, and many Jews moved westward, bringing their religious practices to other regions. Christianity, another monotheistic religion, also disrupted Rome's religious diversity. Over time, Christians' universal claims and their organizational structure played a significant role in transforming the culture and politics of the empire in its later years. By the 3rd century, Christianity had spread throughout the empire, especially during times of hardship. Initially, the Roman authorities persecuted Christians, blaming them for the empire's problems and outlawing their faith. However, the Christian community continued to grow, attracting people from various social backgrounds, including high-born Romans. The shift came when Emperor Galerius decreed the end of official Christian persecution in 311. Constantine Augustus, after a decisive victory in battle, legalized Christianity in 312. This marked a turning point in the relationship between the Roman state and Christianity. Constantine's conversion aimed to reunite the divided empire under a single god. Over the next century, Christianity was established as the state religion. Other religions were labeled as superstitions, their priests were taxed, temples were dismantled, and their gods were marginalized. By the end of the 4th century, being Roman often meant being Christian, and adhering to another religion became a civil offense under Roman law. This shift towards Christianity marked a hardening of Roman politics at a time when the empire was facing various challenges and external threats. It both narrowed the possibilities for religious inclusion in the Roman polity and defined a universalizing vision of imperial culture. The decline of the Western Roman Empire is a complex process that's hard to pin down to a specific date or event. In 324, the Eastern Roman Empire, later known as the Byzantine Empire, was established when Constantine moved the capital to Byzantium, renaming it Constantinople. So, you could say that's when a new chapter in the Roman story began. However, well before the fall of Rome to the Visigoths in 410, the Western Roman Empire was already unraveling. Romans tried to defend their frontiers by forming alliances with various Germanic-speaking tribes on the outskirts of the empire. These tribes, often referred to as barbarians, were not necessarily uncivilized. Many of them aspired to be part of the Roman world. The effectiveness of these alliances depended on whether the Roman center could maintain its relevance and power. Rome started to fragment as emperors divided the realm, and barbarian leaders began taking on both the role of Roman military leaders and conquerors of former Roman territories. As the Western Roman Empire weakened, it left behind multiple, much smaller powers, all shaped in some fundamental ways by their Roman heritage. Some barbarians took up leadership roles within the Roman military, while others assumed responsibility for protecting local communities when Roman defenses faltered. The decline of the Roman Empire led to significant changes. The Roman peace, an era of relative stability and prosperity, came to an end, as did the taxation system and the vast, interconnected economy that had spread wealth, skills, people, and goods across the empire. Sanitation systems, tiled roofs, and advanced pottery disappeared in many parts of northern and central Europe. Literacy rates declined, and livestock became smaller due to poor nutrition. The mines in Italy ceased operation, which improved air quality but signaled the end of many industries. The Roman imperial project, which sought to conquer and spread a single civilization across the Mediterranean and its surroundings, faced multiple challenges. Its success made it a target for external threats that halted its expansion and reduced resources. The close link between military command and political power often resulted in civil wars. The shift to Christianity as the sole state religion undermined the empire's ability to absorb various peoples and cultures. However, many Roman innovations endured beyond the formal empire. Concepts like humanitas, the idea that civilization was a distinct human trait and a marker of the right to rule barbarians, had a lasting impact. Architectural features like arches, amphitheaters, and gridded city layouts continued to influence urban planning for centuries. The ideal, if not always the practice, of rule through law and representative political bodies lived on. Latin, which had united diverse elites in Roman politics, evolved into Romance languages like Italian, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. The notion of citizenship, based on duties and rights and extendable beyond one's people or city, was periodically revived as a means of political inclusion. Constantine's establishment of the Byzantine Empire brought Latin-based political structures to a largely Greek-speaking, but culturally diverse, region in the Eastern Mediterranean. The Eastern Roman Empire continued for another 1,000 years, maintaining many Roman legacies. Rome's fall left behind a powerful imperial legacy connected to Christianity, influencing the ambitions of Byzantines, Islamic caliphs, Carolingians, and later empires around the Mediterranean.